The world is evolving at a faster pace than ever before, and as we begin the path to recovery after worldwide disruption, this podcast explores how the design industries can adapt to changing expectations and create a better future for both your businesses and your consumers. I'm Bethan Ryder, Executive Editorial Director here at WGSN. You're listening to Create Tomorrow, the WGSN podcast. Hi, and welcome to today's episode of the WGSN Create Tomorrow podcast, in which we'll be discussing youth and nostalgia, two things that have often, although it seems counterintuitive, gone hand in hand. So, although many teens and 20-somethings often love a bit of retro, the term's definitely more on the rise as a discussion topic on social media. According to WGSN proprietary data, posts featuring the topic have increased by 19% year on year, with a higher spike in April 2020. So, what is it? The dictionary defines nostalgia as a sentimental longing or wistful affection for the past. It's a fundamental human emotion and has been very much on people's minds during the pandemic and over the past year of lockdowns, and particularly among Gen Z and millennials. Nostalgia among this cohort is something we've been tracking at WGSN for a number of years now. So joining me today to talk about this are four of our WGSN experts. We've got Quentin Humphrey, our youth culture strategist. Hi, Q.
Hey.
And you're calling in from New York, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Cool. We've got Polly Walters, our senior strategist on fashion. Hi, Polly. Where are you?
Hello, I'm in London, rainy London.
Oh, yeah, great. And we've got Annie Johnston from Beauty. Hi, Annie.
Hi, Bethan.
And finally, last but not least, we've got Cassandra Gagnon, our lifestyle and interiors analyst.
Hello.
So thanks everyone for joining me. And I want to kick off with a question for you, Q, because nostalgia's obviously been quite an important thing for people during the pandemic. And I just wondered how you think that has affected this sort of uptick in nostalgia.
It's a great question. I think just off top, the pandemic and lockdown measures have just accelerated nostalgia. Typically when you think about it, you're like, oh, maybe I was nostalgic for a year ago, 2 years ago, or some time in your childhood. But with the pandemic, people were nostalgic for a couple of weeks ago or a few months ago or even last season. So it's just been a rapid increase in what people are nostalgic for. And it's just the time frame has shrunken, so to say, especially in the precarious nature. You don't know what's next. So even the week before when you were a little bit more comfortable with your situation might induce some nostalgia.
What interests me about youth and nostalgia in particular is that I think young people have always enjoyed nostalgia, and often it's for times that they didn't even live through. And I mean, as a child of the 80s myself, we were all about the 50s and 60s, and there was Levi's 501s tapped into that with Motown. And then even sort of rave in the late 80s, we had the Second Summer of Love, 88, 89. So I think that there's always been that connection. And I think there was a New Yorker piece in 2012 where Adam Gopnik introduced nostalgia as a 40-year cycle, describing how people tend to long for periods of time 40 years before their present reality. But I would argue, and others have, that it's actually shorter anyway. I think there's a 20-year cycle often with youth. And I think that this is what's interesting, Q, what you just said about it accelerating. So I wondered, with Gen Z and millennials, there's this sort of digital native generation. How is their relationship to nostalgia different to perhaps mine in the 80s? What do you think's happened?
I think what's most interesting is that we've seen what we've called faux-stalgia, or better yet, a better term for that is anamoya, which is this feeling of nostalgia for a period that you might not actually have lived through, or for a period you haven't even experienced yourself firsthand. And so that's actually playing a role in how, youth today, or Gen Z specifically, integrate nostalgic things into their life. And like I mentioned, the nostalgia curve has definitely been accelerated given the pandemic, but even beyond that, things that they weren't necessarily living through have been a part of their nostalgia, especially if you look at some of the Y2K aesthetics that we can get into further. A lot of them weren't around for that, and they didn't get to experience the noughties. And so now we're seeing them dip and dabble in these things, whether it's, it's social media platforms or even ways of communicating in an analog space. They're just dabbling things that they didn't experience. So we're calling that faux-stalgia, which I think is probably the biggest thing with them, just to be able to experience things that they weren't actually present for.
And is there like an aspect of the fact that they're sort of social media natives or digital natives? There's the speed at which people are actually consuming information now that is perhaps also why this has accelerated. Would you agree? People are kind of being bombarded by memes and and all of this. And do you think that's also helped accelerate nostalgia and kind of people dipping into that?
Absolutely. I mean, we see things like the end of year wrap up, which pretty much recaps your year. It makes it feel a lot shorter than it actually was. And those kind of things that Spotify and the streaming platforms like Apple Music implement that really bring you back a couple of months. And they make it feel like it was much longer than that. So all these technology platforms that have the ability to remind you of what you are doing, whether it's your photos, whether it's your messages, whether it's your your post that they say 6 months ago at this time. It's the ability for technology to remind you what you were doing that induces those feelings of nostalgia in a shorter period of time than say that 20-year cycle that we're used to seeing.
But I want to talk about fashion because I think obviously that's a big area of self-expression and nostalgia. Also, my daughter's Gen Z and she's all about juicy couture and big baggy sweatpants and micro tops. And she comes downstairs. Sometimes it's like a flashback to All Saints at the Met Bar. So I wondered what you're seeing in the fashion space, Polly. I'd love to bring you in now.
I mean, it makes me feel really old. I mean, I'm a child of the 90s. I was born in 91. So I feel like I've kind of really lived these experiences firsthand. And it always used to really make me cringe when like your family members would like look at something you're wearing when you're a teenager and go, oh, I remember wearing that the first time round. And now I literally look at Gen Z and go, oh my gosh, I really do remember wearing that the first time round. So yeah, I'm like, oh gosh. But I mean, we've been kind of tracking the Y2K and the noughties since kind of early 2019, and the 90s have been around for far longer than that in various different guises. But like what Q kind of said, the pandemic has really caused consumers to like favour the familiar. They kind of have this like comfortable view. They view it as these rose-tinted view of the past. And like you mentioned, Gen Zers and millennials, we're super overstimulated. We're bombarded with social interactions and commentary, and we're kind of longing for this time when we can switch off. And I remember when the internet kind of first came out and we had dial-up and, I would get my 30 minutes on MSN in the evening and then you were off, you were done, and that was it. And I think like now I'm like, I wish I could do that. That would be amazing. So, that I think it's people are longing for this kind of analog time where you could switch off. But in terms of products, I think the visual motifs of the noughties and the Y2K really resonate with the youth because they're playful, and there's so many subgenres that kind of go within it. You've got the like Lizzie McGuire noughties, you've got these neo-rave Matrix vibes, you've got 90s grunge. There's so much to pick from, and there's equally kind of interchangeable. And from these kind of like tiny sunglasses, baggy jeans, crop tops, platform flip-flops, it's a really, really distinctive look, but it's super expressive and fun. And I kind of think that's why it lands with the youth.
It does feel like it's interesting that you mention grunge because I know that things like the smiley face is back. According to our WGS in-stock data, it's smiley faces have increased by 21% in the UK, 42% in the US across new in apparel. And smiley licensing products are still upticking year on year, 93% in the UK, plus 30% in the US. So that's a big one. But I'm interested to hear that grunge too, because that was the kind of... I guess that was the heroin chic side of the 90s that was perhaps less upbeat. But that's also... And is that come back in a more upbeat way? Because I know lots of people are dyeing their hair in a more kind of happy pinks, like Annie, who's on this call now. But is grunge coming back in a similarly kind of downbeat way, or is it a bit happier?
I would say it's still like a similar vibe. Like, it's kind of really resonated with this like return of the cardigan. And I think it kind of plays hand in hand with the thrifting thing. And, I didn't necessarily live through grunge because it was kind of early 90s and I was a baby, but I hit that grunge probably in the noughties when I was like a Nirvana obsessed teenager sort of thing. So, and I feel like it's coming back round in the same way I did it, in the kind of the DMs, the checks, the slip dresses. It's that kind of, those kind of key Gen Z uniform dress codes, I think, that are kind of coming back. So you've got your baggy jeans and crop tops for like one end, you've got your grunge girls, in the dresses or their slip dresses. So it's quite, I think they're kind of coming back in very similar ways, I guess.
And the motifs are very much about this sort of sparking joy, aren't they? And kind of making people, as you say, it's a very uncertain time for certainly Gen Z millennials. We're entering a recession, so I guess we're going to see more and more of this. And I think it's interesting what you just said, Polly, about the resale market, because that's obviously, my daughter's on Depop all the time. That's obviously presumably kind of fueling this too.
Yeah, totally. So I think My TikTok feed is literally littered with thrift hauls, not only for fashion, but for homewares. I think for Gen Z, there's a lot of it that is about, thrifting is super important from a sustainability perspective, but I think for Gen Z, it's kind of more about individuality. It's like the idea of finding something amazing and one-off that no one else has and customizing it. But they're also really savvy. They're a super, super savvy generation. They're a frugal generation. They're value hunters. They like to get more bang for their buck, hence the mega appeal of resale platforms such as Depop, because they can thrift, but they also hand in hand get like all of these styling ideas. So they've kind of got inspiration and frugal purchasing at the same time, which I think kind of really defines them as a generation a bit.
So those motifs are happening in interiors. Is that also happening in beauty, Annie?
Yeah, definitely. So we're seeing a lot of emojis, we're seeing yin yangs, those cute little cherries, any kind of those print motifs in fashion interiors tends to come through on the nails in quite a big way over in beauty. That's kind of the more playful, nostalgic side of the aesthetics we're seeing on beauty. The other kind of side of aesthetics we're also seeing are the softer 90s makeup looks. So we've got the fine brows, the dark lip liner, the muted brown tones. They're kind of coming back for their more comforting elements they're providing to consumers. But then when we're looking at the hairstyles that are coming back, this is what I find quite interesting, is the mullet and the rat's tails have become really big this year, the mullet in particular. So back in the 80s and 90s, these were usually associated with those kind of anarchic, rebellious subcultures. The reason they've come back around this time is because people are feeling those sorts of emotions again, as they're feeling quite let down by people in positions of power with all the terrible things that are happening at the moment. So I think it's quite interesting, that differentiation between those kind of playful aesthetics, the comforting aesthetics, and those more anarchic, kind of with those sad undertones aesthetics as well.
This is happening, sort of goes hand in hand, obviously, fashion and beauty, doesn't it, Annie? I know I was quite excited to hear about Lancome's Juicy Tubes coming back, because my cinnamon one with a darker lip liner got a lot of action in the late 90s. So I just wonder if what you're seeing in beauty, and there is this kind of bringing back retro brands. So companies are reigniting old brands and things. Old lines rather.
Yeah, definitely. It's something we're actually calling zombie beauty over on Beauty, where brands and products are coming back from the dead, so to speak. So yeah, Lancome Juicy Tubes, they've triggered loads of excitement. The Body Shop have actually re-released their White Musk scent that was really popular back in the day. But I think one of the most interesting case studies we're seeing here is the kind of reinvention of Old Spice, which is obviously a really popular grooming and personal care brand, decades old now. And not only have their sales accelerated during the pandemic, they've also done something really interesting whereby they've launched their first bricks and mortar barbershop. So in this barbershop that they've set up in Ohio, they're going to have celebrity barber residents, but they're also going to have a content studio. So it kind of gives influencers and consumers the opportunity to go in, film their Instagram videos, their TikToks, their YouTubes. So it's kind of giving them the opportunity to stay true to their nostalgic roots, but then reinvent themselves for the modern day as well. So that's been quite interesting to see.
That's really interesting. I mean, Polly, in fashion, are there brands that you've noticed that are really sort of tapping into that in a clever way too?
Yeah, I mean, you can't really move for them. We're seeing so many brands kind of celebrating their anniversaries or brand anniversaries, kind of dipping back into their archives, and this kind of nostalgic idea creates an opportunity for them to kind of loop back and celebrate their own history. So I mean, it's really clever marketing because it kind of recontextualizes their work for a new audience by tapping into kind of positive memories and authentic experiences. So yeah, it's there's so many, I wouldn't even know where to start kind of thing, but it's just it's so common now.
Yeah, and I mean, I think it's interesting, Annie, that you mentioned Old Spice, because obviously fragrance is the closest sense linked to memory anyway. So I assume fragrance, this is a big place to play for brands or opportunities.
Yeah, massively. Yeah, we all know fragrance has immense power to evoke memories. And what we've actually seen during the pandemic is this mass migration back to classic scents. So this is partly fueled by our reliance on e-com during this time, not wanting to risk trying new things just in case we don't like them, as we've not been able to go in and sample in store. But scents like Dolce & Gabbana Light Blue, Chanel No. 5, Gucci Rush, their sales have gone up to something like 180% in some cases. So people are really like rediscovering those classic scents. It also ties into something that we're looking at on WGSN called Grandma Beauty, is what we're calling it. And it's kind of like a return to these like rose and lavender comforting scents, not only for their nostalgic power, but we're kind of seeing that it's also reminding consumers of their older family members and during times that they can't be with them. So yeah, that's kind of two different plays that we're seeing in the fragrance arena at the moment.
I mean, I think with beauty, obviously packaging is really important, and I think retro packaging is often a really clever marketing ploy to attract consumers through familiarity. So what kind of things are happening there? I mean, I read on our own site that Gen Z's income is set to grow 400% to hold more than a quarter of global income in 2030, surpassing the millennials. So clearly this is a really important cohort to tap into. So what's happening with beauty there and packaging, and how are they reaching out to this consumer and this nostalgia?
Yeah, so retro packaging is like a really actionable quick win strategy that a lot of brands have been jumping on to tap into this nostalgic trend. We've seen brands release like eyeshadow palettes and face mask sets in like packaging inspired by cassette tapes, which is super cool. Hot Topic even released a palette in a Blockbuster DVD case. And we've also seen a lot of collaborations in this space as well. So American brand Morphe have released like a stationery inspired range with Lisa Frank, who I know was super popular in the 90s. Everybody had a backpack, a little stationery kit by them. And another one that I was really excited about was Colourpop's collaboration with Lizzie McGuire. It's a really fun and cool range that they've done. So I think looking to partner with entertainment companies would be a really great strategy for like brands in this space.
Well, I know that over the pandemic, things like Golden Girls were, shot up in people, his viewing habits. Everyone was going back. I watched The Kids from Fame with my daughter.
Yeah, comfort viewing. Yeah, definitely.
So, let's move on to sort of the home, because obviously we've all been at home a lot lately, and lots of people are lots of youth are having to stay in the family home for longer, and many have returned during the pandemic as well. So, Cassandra, I'd love to hear about this in the sort of interior space. Bedrooms are obviously another area of self-expression. Things like analog, vinyl sales are up. What are you seeing in interiors, Cassandra?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, well, I just turned 24 last month. I was born in 97, so I'm technically the oldest age of Gen Z. And even a lot of like my friends my age and years below them, like, are back at home for the foreseeable future. And then there's some who are just getting their first apartment. So there's actually quite a range of different living spaces that people are in. But in regards to being back at their like childhood home, I think there's something so interesting going on there because it's inherently a nostalgic place. But I find that it's so subversive to choose the nostalgic references that you're interacting with in that room that are not the nostalgia that's inherently there. And when it comes to the analog items, we're actually exploring right now reports coming out called Framing Memories. And it's about how capturing memories were already super important, and especially to the youth, but post-pandemic, it's only going to be treasured more. Like, the love of it will only be intensified by the excitement of being able to do things again. And as far as analog goes, like, instant film is only here to stay. Polaroid and Fujifilm are still developing more compact cameras in printers. I mean, there's the Polaroid Lab, which literally takes digital photos from your phone and prints them in a Polaroid film format. So you don't even need the camera to have that on your walls. And we see that with the disposable camera too, and the development of the Abdispo really just proves such. So items like frames and albums and even phone cases with sleeves that are formatted specifically for these film types will be important, which has always been a niche for brands like Urban Outfitters. And it's really funny that we said that the time frame has really like shortened for nostalgia, because a lot of this feels very like 2013 Tumblr to me, and it's just coming right back already. And one company doing something really cool with the displays is Kai and Joe. They're based with you guys in London, and they actually have these curated collage kits that are a bunch of pictures to be tiled together on bedroom and dorm walls, and they come in a variety of really specific aesthetics. And the most nostalgia-driven one is called Pink Glow, and it has images of like neon lights and glitter makeup and velvet movie theater seats, that kind of thing.
That's really, really interesting. And I wonder how, I mean, bedrooms, as you say, like mine was always it's always a space for self-expression, but how much do you think the kind of TikTok, you know, clearly is lighting coming in there and different things like that to speak to that as a backdrop?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, people are literally designing their bedrooms to make content. So like those kinds of like those collages are perfect because it's like already perfectly curated and you have it in your background and you're set. And I think that's a lot of the appeal of like the photos and those like small analog items too, and small accessories that you can hang up or display, is that it's all very quick personal ways to amplify that background. And lighting comes into that absolutely, especially color changing lights, LED strips, being able to change it with the tap of a button on your phone. And another end is that we're seeing a lot of, I know I follow a bunch of people who are like, it's estate sales, it's vintage sellers, it's thrift, it's getting back into that circular and resell economy. And not only is it encouraging more circular economies, but I've actually seen it inform brands of key design eras and inspirations to start producing. So a key item of vintage that we were seeing for a while were Art Deco lamps, and the like shell-shaped lamp has now been like mass produced by brands even like Target.
I think another thing I know you've covered a lot on L&I is the uptick in buying plants. And I certainly, when I was my daughter's age, I had no interest. She has, and I know succulents were very popular with millennials, for, you know, but she literally goes to the only place she went to in lockdown was the plant shop. She's created these tin can planters that she's got on a hanger, like a kind of, she loves the look of macrame hangers. I mean, again, this is a real nostalgia, isn't it? Because cheese plants to me are real 70s. Would you say, Cassandra, that's also tapping into that plant, that craze for plants as well?
Absolutely. And I also feel like, I mean, such a big part of nostalgia is creating comfort. So it doesn't always have to be like very specific, like era references. It can also just be that like comforting, surrounded by like nature. It's like more of nostalgia for not being connected. It's like a disconnected thing. The bedroom has also become like a multi-purpose space since people are home. And one thing, both in dorms and in bedrooms at the parent's home, is that rituals that are usually performed like in the bathroom, self-care ones, are now shifted to the bedroom. So the bedroom becomes the bigger self-care space. And I think the plants like really go into that, of creating a sanctuary section. I mean, there's even like little like meditation corners that people are sculpting out of their rooms. So even furniture and products and small goods like yoga mats, etc., help section the room into these self-care spaces or separate it from their desk where they're working. And the plants definitely can either be used to divide that or as an accent in those more dedicated self-care spaces.
So, Cassandra, what do you think the opportunities are for interiors brands in this space? And are there particular categories where nostalgia is sort of playing out more than others?
Yeah, I think one really like quick opportunity for brands is there's definitely an increased licensing opportunities. So the youth is really revisiting childhood characters and icons. For example, Sonics did phone cases in partnership with Care Bears, and Urban Outfitters stocks a lot of like classic Nintendo, Mario, those kind of like games and memorabilia. But as far as product categories go, where I'm really seeing it the most, I mean, it's across all product categories, but the most condensed to me has been stationery, firstly, especially like those brands we talked about coming kind of back from the dead. I mean, Caboodles have brought back like their little kits and like pencil cases and things like that. And then there's Yubi, who has done a bunch of like full glitter covers of journals and things like that. And even the very mall-centric brand Claire's has had a bit of a comeback with stationery with furry pens and notebooks and things like that. And then another category that people don't think of right away that I've actually seen a lot of great product development is actually in cannabis accessories. So Burning Love has done these metallic grinders with yin yang symbols on the front, smiley face rolling papers, and heart locket shaped lighters. And Edie Parker Flowers has done rhinestone encrusted lighters that literally just look like someone went in with a hot glue gun and rhinestones and just placed them all over. And even Mary J. Shop did pipes where it's just like glitter suspended in resin, so it just has that like swirling glitter appeal. Really anything made around that time. So that's what I've really been seeing category-wise.
So it's clear that this is something that brands are tapping into, but I'd love to move on. We're getting to the end of our sort of time, but I'd love to just sort of finish again by going back to you, Q, to talk about social platforms really and what opportunities might be there for brands and what's happening in that space in terms of how they're really tapping into this nostalgia. I know you've got some great sort of words here, something I don't understand. Digital nostalgia. Tell me about that, Q.
Absolutely. So on some platforms, we're seeing digital nostalgia or internet nostalgia. So many different ways to talk about it, but it's basically websites, apps, platforms that are new, but they're designed with like retro features and motifs that evoke, an earlier time in internet culture. So for instance, we're seeing platforms, one of them that I particularly like is a platform called Poolside FM, which is basically an online radio, but it's designed to feel like, Windows 99. And so you can go on and listen to songs from, the 80s and these synth pop records that, most people didn't actually live through, but these platforms kind of evoke that time. And beyond that, Facebook, for instance, even launched Egg to sort of recapture the allure of the early internet. The site actually features a dancing baby meme of the 90s, and it taps into this idea of misplaced nostalgia by letting users create digital art without the pressures or praise from others. And one of the big components or drivers that are galvanizing a lot of young users to gravitate towards digital nostalgia is just the simple fact that they're Zoom fatigue. They're inundated with all these platforms and apps, whether it's Dispo, whether it's Insta, whether it's Instagram Lite, whether it's BitClout, right? There's just so much social media to consume. And so by paring it back and making it a little bit more simpler, even if it's a new app that creates a simpler platform or simpler ease, that's definitely resonating with the group. Back in December 2020, an 18-year-old based in Germany, his name's An, super interesting coder. He created this platform called Space Hey, which is effectively a carbon copy of MySpace, right? And this 18-year-old wasn't around for that. He never got to experience MySpace, but he went on record online saying that, he was so deep in Reddit and all of his friends who were a little bit older were always raving about how great MySpace was. So he took it upon himself to basically recreate that, and he coded it. And beyond that, there are a lot of other apps that are like resurfacing. Even Bebo, for instance, the UK social app that took a dive back in, early, 2012? I think they took a little bit of a hiatus, but they've relaunched. And so even for them to see some success and, be able to join the conversation again for social media just speaks to the fact that people are over the big tech platforms and they want something a little bit simpler.
God, the idea of Bebo coming back horrifies me, because that was like the first social platform I had, and it was, I don't know, and I look back on that and I'm like, God, that was really like paved the way for like Facebook likes, and because you'd get likes and my friends would always have more likes than me, and
you'd have a best friend, wouldn't you? You'd have your 3 best friends on your profile.
Oh, it scares me, the thought. I think I found it a couple of years ago and I was like, delete, trying to get rid of it.
I would love to see that, Polly.
No.
I suppose you could argue, Q, that even the rise of audio, in a way, is a form of nostalgia. That something like Clubhouse, which we've launched on. Look out for W Just Saying Create Tomorrow on Clubhouse. But you could argue that is a kind of going back to the word, the spoken word, a more relaxed, a less kind of judgy platform.
100%. And I think that almost lends itself to the new radio. If you think about how you used to just turn on the radio and kick back and listen to it, and very just mindlessly just have it on in the background. I think that's what these new sonic audio platforms are doing. And just kind of like I said, giving a new experience with socials without having to look or scroll like Paul was just saying, like things and how many likes am I getting and that kind of thing. You can just tune in and engage with it in a new way. That's less hands-on, but still very interactive and engaging at the same time. And so there are so many different radio platforms that have, seen an uptick in usership and, have grown in their downloads and that sort of thing. But just the idea of being able to interact without necessarily having to go through the process of sharing something and posting something that might feel permanent. It's about the ephemeral nature of these products and these platforms. And I think that's why Snap has seen so much success, right? Because you can send something and then it's just gone. And the same thing with these online platforms. Like we're on Clubhouse right now, but once you close the room, it's gone. And those kind of things that kind of tap into what radio was, right? You're listening to the radio right now. You heard this song right now. Your favorite DJ just said this funny, he just told this joke right now. And if you weren't there for it, you missed it. And so even within this nostalgia, there's a bit of FOMO tied to it as well, right?
I'd love to wrap up now with just asking you all what your kind of favourite blast from the past is. It could be anything. It could be like a TV programme, food, a product, a film. Let's go round. Q, what's your kind of nostalgia indulgence?
My guilty nostalgic indulgence, very guilty, is old MTV, where they actually played music videos, where they didn't play ridiculousness all day, and you could go on and watch TRL, and you could catch a little bit of reality TV, but it was just very Y2K, and you'd see Ashton Kutcher wearing his Von Dutch hats, and there was a lot of Ed Hardy on the television, and just that era of MTV, and you can still see pockets of it on MTV2 when they play it, but just that era of just television was just so exciting because, again, there wasn't so much media to be found, and like when you could kind of see pop culture in front of you and your favorite artists and your favorite entertainers wearing these things that were so hard to get, it just has a very soft spot in my heart.
Yeah, for sure. I'm with you. I'm a top of the pops kind of girl, but right, Polly, what about you?
Funny you should say Top of the Pops. That's exactly what I said to Annie earlier. I said such a British reference, but Top of the Pops on a Friday night was my ride or die. I absolutely live for it. But that, or more of like a global reference, I say Lizzie McGuire. Literally, I was obsessed with Lizzie McGuire. She was my style icon, and look at her now, and I'm still I would literally wear that now. So yeah, and she's everywhere at the moment on everything. So
I have to confess, I've missed her. I think I might have been born too early. I'll have to check her out. Annie, what about you?
So I'm one of the 20-something Gen Zers that also moved home for part of the pandemic. My sister, who's one of the younger Gen Zers, she's 20, she wanted to get on my old Walkman. Apparently that's the thing that the younger Gen Zers are into now, listening back to the Walkman again. It's really fun digging back through our old box. I found my Motorola flip phone, my iPod Nano thing. And I also saw on TikTok that I thought was hilarious. There was a girl doing her hair, and she was using iPod shuffles as hair clips, and she had them all down her hair. So maybe that's going to be the next big beauty trend. Watch this space.
It's funny you say that, Annie. I saw something the other day with a CD Walkman on the tube.
Yeah, I think it's that desire to go back to those analog kind of aesthetics again.
Cassandra, what about you? What's your go-to guilty?
For me, it's a general category of any of the music, film, or television that featured what I call the women who deserved better of the 90s and early 2000s. So anything featuring Britney Spears or Paris Hilton or Lindsay Lohan or people whose PR just really did them dirty. I love watching them at their peak thriving.
Thank you to Q, Polly, Annie and Cassandra for taking time to speak with us today. If you're a WJSN subscriber, you'll find reports covering many of the issues we touched upon across our platforms, from Gen Z nostalgia for digital natives on Insight to youth nostalgia on lifestyle interiors and nostalgic beauty on beauty. If you want to find out how to subscribe, head over to WGSN.com to discover how you can get access to our service. We're constantly publishing new content focused on how we can design a brighter, better future for our industries, including food and drink, lifestyle and interiors, beauty and fashion. You can subscribe to this show on all major podcast platforms, and if you like what you've heard, why not leave us a rating and review on iTunes? I'd also like to thank our podcast producer, Roland Bodenham. We'll be back in 2 weeks for our next episode. So until then, stay well and healthy, and we'll see you next time.